So I'm going to give you guys the facts. You guys can decide whether or not this is good or not. Let's go back in time, though. What is the Ali Act? Where did the Ali Act come from? Well, the Muhammad Ali Boxing Reform Act was put into place in 2000. This was Congress's response to an industry riddled with exploitation and chaos at the time. Promoters often were serving both as promoters and managers. It caused a massive conflict of interest right there. Sanctioning bodies were manipulating rankings for financial and political favors. Fighters had not allowed transparency about their contracts, their earnings, rankings. There was no national oversight. It was really just a chaotic place in boxing beforehand. Some might say it made it better for boxing as a whole, but it was chaotic behind the scenes. So the Ali Act came into place in 2000. What it did was it protected the fighters' rights. It separated promoters from managers. It required full disclosure of contracts, and it empowered state commissions. Now those state commissions have become much more prevalent in modern society in terms of boxing. We all know that the state commissions have a lot more power. That is why. It was not necessarily a reset, but was focusing on fairness and the welfare of fighters. All right, we fast forward to the calendar year of 2025. At this point in time, these rumors have now been coming out in regards to politicians in America trying to make changes to the Ali Act. What is this? This is new proposed legislation backed by Representatives Brian Jack and SchuZ Davids. Builds on the original modernizing fire protection and restructuring oversight. It's not removing everything about it. This is only simply going to be a revival they're considering it, meaning they're going to make changes to it, but the Ali Act will still be in place. The structural overhaul. This is what's going to be put into place now. Unified boxing organizations, also known as UBOs moving forward, as I discussed this. Independent sanctioning entities that offer alternative title paths, rankings, and fight opportunities. This will run alongside the WBC, WBA, IBF, and WBO, the four major sanctioning bodies in America, in the world. There will be no sanctioning fees for titles or rankings within UBOs. What does that mean? All right, to give you guys a little bit more clarity in this situation. Oftentimes, fighters have to pay certain fees when they're going through a certain organizing body. Now, there's a lot of misinformation in regards to this. I know both Mike Coppinger and I forget one of the commissioning bodies was going back and forth on X yesterday. So just to put it out there, yes, essentially there are fees that fighters must pay when they are going to be sanctioned by a certain sanctioning body. That's a fact. When they go to fight, those sanctioning fees are placed into it. Not necessarily that they're paying money to be ranked, but once you become world champion, you do have to pay different fees in that regard. Let's go to the other aspect, the fighter welfare enhancements. This proposed legislation is now putting in place a minimum fight pay of $150 per scheduled round. Also, injury coverage, at least $25,000 for fight-related medical needs. Free annual medical exams, including neurological testing and MRIs. Anti-doping and trauma-informed medical teams ringside. Also, there's going to be insurance for training injuries. If these are being read to you and you start to think, isn't this very similar to what Dana White and the UFC does? Spot on. This entire movement is going to push into what is happening right now in the new looking boxing scene. Obviously, you can make your opinion on whether or not that's right, but that is unfortunate. That's what's going to be put into place. Let's go to the next standpoint. Training access provisions. There will be free access to licensed gyms and training facilities for all active pro boxers. Levels the playing field for fighters without deep promotional funding. It cuts down on personal expenses for training camps, and it supports health, readiness, and compliance with new annual exam rules. Once again, very similar to what the UFC has done under Dana White's supervision. What the UFC does is they have different performance centers placed around the world. Those centers are given full access to each and every single member of the UFC. If you're part of the UFC, whether world champion or just got signed, you have full access to all the different facilities. And the one in Las Vegas, for example, is one of the most world-renowned facilities in all the world. Those are the types of things that now boxers will have access to if this law gets placed. Oversight and transparency. UBO is regulated by state athletic commissions, clear fighter contracts and pay structure, disclosure, and matchmaking and rankings publicly available. Let's go to the upsides about this. If this new rule does come into play, the upside is this. It's a fighter first shift. It's better pay, healthcare, and support systems. On top of that, gym access demonstrates prep, helps journeymen and regional warriors stay fight ready year around. UBOs challenge legacy monopolies. This could create more meaningful and competitive fight paths for different fighters, and It also implements the UFC style structure, could streamline scheduling and fan engagement by having more narrative control like the UFC does have. Now, the concerns about this. Legacy erosion. This parallel belts may muddy history and prestige. When we look at comparing former history, the champions, we already have the big debate between 3-belt champions and now the 4-belt era. Now we're adding in this whole new curveball. What does that bring into play? Well, historically, now a lot more things are different. This would be an entirely new era of boxing as opposed to what it was previously. Power centralized risk. If major backers like TKO control UBOs, they might mimic UFC's closed ecosystem, meaning this does open the door potentially for a monopoly system to be put into place in boxing. When you think of MMA, it is a sport where there are multiple different promotion companies. However, the UFC is, by some people that don't know MMA very well, would think of the UFC, aka the MMA. They don't know anything different. UFC is far and away a monopoly system in MMA. Now, not entirely by definition, because there are other MMA promotions, but the UFC is far and away the most dominant, most successful, most viewership, so on and so forth. Only one really making a massive profit is the UFC. Promoter tension. Traditional players may resist new regulations or shift matchmaking to their benefit, meaning guys like Eddie Hearn and Frank Warren and Al Heyman and Bob Arum, so on and so forth, Oscar De La Hoya. These different promoters are now going to have to realize that if this gets put into place, the boxing scene drastically shifts. And if that is done, they're going to have to find ways to be creative and still keep their business afloat if they choose to stay in the business. That's why they're going to have a lot of pushback, because this new system is completely going to make a new era of boxing. On top of that, oversight gaps. State commissions may struggle to enforce standards evenly. Those are the concerns. So what does this mean for boxing future? The bill could radically reshape the fight game. For boxers, more financial medical security, especially for those outside of title contention. Let me add to this real quickly. In boxing, I'm not sure there is another sport that compares to the pay gap. And what do I mean by that? I mean at the top of the game, you're talking world champions like Canelo Alvarez, like a Terrence Bud Crawford, and Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, the top of the food chain when it comes to boxing, Naoya Inoue. Those guys are some of the wealthiest athletes in all the world. You look at the Sport Track list last year in terms of the top earning athletes in 2024. 4 of the top 10, if I'm not mistaken, were boxers, and actually 4 of the top 6. On top of that, there were about 3 or 4 other guys within the top 30 or 45. Then there was nobody else. The reasoning behind this is that boxing creates an infrastructure where the top of the food chain gets paid exorbitantly high amounts of money. But then you go down to these other guys. Even guys that are currently ranked do not make a lot of money and are having to work multiple jobs. And you go further than that. Guys that are working themselves up as prospects that are not signed to major promotional companies, they're having to work multiple jobs to even step foot and go fight in boxing. That is a problem. And what this means is that there could be at least more financial medical security for them, meaning that at least there's a smaller threshold, a floor that boxers will now get paid with this new rule getting put into place. For promoters, opportunity to innovate or a threat to long-held power structures, meaning this era of promoters, all the guys I listed a little bit ago, now there's going to be a time and era where they're going to have to make changes. What do those changes look like? We will see, but they will have to be put in a position to make different changes in boxing and how they run their businesses. For fans, there will be cleaner narratives, bigger fights, and less ducking or deeper belt confusion. That's the most likely thing. If the other different sanctioning bodies do continue to move on with what they're doing, you're going to have this confusing situation where you have those 4 world championships on top of whatever this new organization body is going to do. That could cause a lot of issues. However, if, hypothetically speaking, every boxer gets involved with this new game plan, you will be setting yourself up for a position where no more ducking can happen. Every guy's gunning for the top guy. Big fights are happening. Rankings are accurate. So on and so forth. Very similar to how the UFC does it. Whether you like it or not, this is the play structure that's going to be put into place right now. So the bottom line, this is not just going to be reform. It's a strategic pivot that could echo across the sports ecosystem. Whether it becomes boxing's renaissance or its reinventation depends on execution and who ends up pulling the strings. Obviously, based upon everything I've told you guys, there seems to be a large, almost a hand over this by Dana White. Dana White and Turkey's relationship is very well known. Dana White's going to be a part of boxing. Turkey's given Dana White the keys to host and promote the biggest boxing fight of this decade. Dana White has obviously got his hands put in place with what this new legislation is going to look like. He will be the guy running it. That is all I'm going to give you guys. These are the facts about what's actually happening, what the rules implement. Whether you are on the side of that or not liking it, that's to make your own personal opinion. Right now, it is what it is. We cannot stop what's going to happen. We might as well just sit back and witness what's going to occur. But let me know your thoughts. Is this something that makes sense for boxing? Is it for the better or the worst? What's your thoughts on the Ali Act? Let me know in the comments. But right now, all I know is this. We can only sit back and wait and see what's actually going to happen over the duration of the next 3, 4, 5, maybe even 10 years. But there's going to be massive changes happening in boxing.